It's been raining for days in the Nicosia district of Cyprus, spring 2019. The hills around the old copper mines at Mitsero are waterlogged. The ground is saturated. Underground, floodwater is pushing through mine shafts that haven't been active in decades, shifting debris, loosening things, moving them toward the surface. Nobody is watching this happen. Nobody has been watching for a long time. It's April 14th, and a German man is walking near one of the old shafts. He has a camera. He is taking in the landscape. And at the mouth of one shaft, pushed up by days of flooding, he sees something that shouldn't be there. A body, female, naked, bound, decomposed. He calls the police. The officers who arrive don't know who she is. They don't know how long she's been down there. And they don't know that this one body, surfacing by accident on a rainy afternoon, is about to pull a thread that will unravel one of the worst crimes in the modern history of this island. This is the story of the Mitsero murders. If you or your child spent years growing up on social media and experienced serious mental health struggles, you should hear this. Recently, a jury ordered Meta and YouTube to pay millions for their role in designing and promoting addictive platforms. They knew their apps could contribute to anxiety, depression, and body image issues, but didn't share those risks while prioritizing profits. The recent historic verdict underscores the consequences of those decisions. Now, Morgan & Morgan is stepping up to hold these platforms accountable for the harm they caused. Click the link in my bio to take a short quiz. You may be entitled to a potential recovery of over $1,000. The first thing investigators needed was a name. The body was too decomposed for easy identification. Forensic work and missing persons records finally provided an answer. Her name was Mary Rose Tiburcio, 39 years old, from the Philippines, a domestic worker. She had already been reported missing in May of 2018, almost a year earlier. And yet for 11 months, she lay undiscovered at the bottom of a flooded mine shaft, around 20 miles from the capital, while her case lay unsolved. In the end, it wasn't police work that found Mary Rose Tiburcio. It was the rain. Why did no one look for her? And hold on to that question, because the case is about to get bigger. 6 days later, April 20th, search crews were still working the same mine shaft where Mary Rose was found, and they pulled out a second body. Another woman, also from the Philippines, also a domestic worker. Her name was Arian Palanas Lozano, and she was 28 years old. Two women, same location, both foreign, both domestic workers. And it would turn out both had been strangled to death. This was no longer just a tragedy. A tragedy is one woman. Two women in the same hole in the ground is a pattern. Somebody chose this place. Somebody used it more than once. Somebody carried these women out there to an abandoned mine in the middle of nowhere and dropped them into the dark, expecting no one would ever come looking. And that person was right, because both of these women had been reported missing, but no one had come looking. To understand how that happened, you have to understand the situation these women were living in. You see, the small Mediterranean island has been an EU member since 2004, and that status draws tens of thousands of women every year from the Philippines, Nepal, Romania, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam to work in Cypriot homes. But there was a catch. As we see in many of these situations, their visa was tied to their employer. If these domestic workers left, even if their employer was abusive, they risked losing their right to stay entirely. These women were vulnerable, usually had few connections, and their residence was not permanent. And so, at that time, when one of these women disappeared, the police had a default answer ready. She changed employers, she moved on, or the phrase that would come to define this entire case: she went north. It was assumed that the woman who had disappeared had just crossed into the breakaway Turkish-controlled territory in the island's northern third. It was a convenient assumption for the Cypriot police. The two territories have separate police forces, separate legal systems, and not a lot of law enforcement cooperation. So once a person crosses the border, they enter a new jurisdiction. She went north, provided the Cypriot authorities with an explanation for a disappearance that required no evidence. It required no follow-up. And over the years, case after case, it was an explanation that allowed them to sweep a significant issue under the rug. But this time, there was clear evidence that two of these women didn't go north, because this time the police had their bodies. And one of these women had phone records that would prove to be invaluable. Before the discovery of Arian's body, investigators pulled Mary Rose's communications, and one relationship in particular stood out. There were roughly 6 months of messages exchanged between her and a man she'd met on the dating app Badoo. What was particularly interesting was his handle, Orestes35. In Greek mythology, Orestes is the son who murders his own mother to avenge his father. Whether the man behind the account chose that name deliberately, no one can say. But the digital trail ran straight from the message to a real identity. And on April 18th, before the second body was even recovered, the police moved in and made an arrest. And the man was not what you might expect. He wasn't a loner. He wasn't someone on the fringes of society. He was Nikos Metaxas, 35 years old, a captain in the Cypriot National Guard, uniformed, salaried, a father of two, separated from his wife, active in public life, a man seemingly in good standing. How did a man like this end up connected to two murdered women? Nikos refused to say, but he didn't have to talk because his devices were talking for him. Investigators went through his hard drives, his vehicles, his drone. They found out his recent movements and discovered that he had been in contact with more than 30 women through the app. The evidence stacked up, but about a week into custody, the case took another disturbing turn. Nikos told the officers watching him that he was bored. He asked for a pen and paper, and then he wrote 10 pages by hand. These pages told investigators that the two women found were not the only women he'd killed. They weren't the only bodies he disposed of. He offered to take the investigators to the others, and there began a recovery process that would take weeks. He took them first to a military firing range near Arunta. He walked the ground himself and pointed to a dry well. There, they found the remains of a woman from Nepal, Asmita Katkabista. She died of a head injury. According to his account, she had caught him secretly filming her during an intimate moment. She confronted him, and then he killed her for it. He told them about another body in a lake near Ziliatos, and he directed them to the place he'd chosen with the most care, the Red Lake. The Red Lake at Mitsero is not really a lake. It's a flooded open-pit copper mine, abandoned for half a century. Its water stained a deep, unnatural red by the minerals bleeding out of the rock. Decades of acid mine drainage have turned it into something closer to a chemical bath than a body of water, corrosive enough that no diver can simply pull on a wetsuit and go in. Whatever goes into the Red Lake is not meant to come back out. That was the point. Recovering the bodies became an operation unlike anything the island's emergency services had ever encountered. Crews worked the shoreline for weeks. Robotic cameras and sonar were lowered into the red water to map what lay on the bottom, because divers were only able to enter in specialist protective gear, and only for as long as the water would let them. Day after day, they scanned the murky depths for shapes that didn't belong. they found one suitcase. Scotland Yard experts and UK forensic specialists flew in as the scale of what had happened became clear. They worked all 4 scenes that Nikos had mentioned: the mineshaft, the firing range, and the 2 lakes. Part of their task was to weigh a possibility no one wanted to say out loud: that there might be more bodies than Nikos mentioned. And slowly, they found the other suitcases. Nikos had folded the bodies of his victims into ordinary luggage and weighed each one down with cement blocks before sinking them into water he was certain no one would ever search. One more suitcase was recovered, then another. Each had to be caged and lifted with painstaking care, then handed to pathologists whose first examinations couldn't even establish an identity because of what the lake had done to what was inside. It took DNA to give the bodies back their names. Inside the suitcases were Livia Florentina Bunea, 36, from Romania, and her 8-year-old daughter, Elena. The 2 were killed in September 2016, making them Nikos' first known victims. The 3rd body recovered from the Red Lake was Maricar Valdez Arquiola, 30, from the Philippines, who had been missing since December 2017. All 3 had been strangled to death. That left the final body to find: Mary Rose Tiburcio's 6-year-old daughter, Sierra. Nikos originally claimed that he hadn't killed Sierra at all. He said that she had choked on her own vomit and he had disposed of her body in a panic. He also initially misled detectives as to the location of her body, delaying its recovery. Eventually, she was recovered from Lake Memi near Siliatos. She had also been strangled to death. This brought the total number of victims to 7: 5 women, 2 young girls. And when investigators laid the case out against missing persons reports, they found the thing that would turn a serial murder investigation into a national scandal. 6 of the 7 had been reported missing to police. People surrounding these women and girls had done exactly what they were supposed to do. They'd contacted the authorities. And then the authorities had done nothing. The failures weren't subtle. In some cases, officers never checked whether the missing woman's phone was still switched on. In one case, 3 months passed between the day the report was filed and the day police first took a statement from someone close to her. The women had left their passports behind. Not one of them had made a single bank withdrawal after vanishing. Everything that should have screamed these women did not simply leave was sitting right there in the paperwork. Livia and her daughter, Elena, both disappeared in September 2016. A friend reported Livia missing within a week. A local journalist investigated and pushed police directly for answers, hard enough to get a response on record. The police told her they had good reason to believe Livia and Elena had crossed into the north. No evidence was ever produced for that. And one of the most tragic things about this case is that if the police had looked into the disappearances of these 2 people, they may have been able to catch Nikos before he killed 5 other people. Arian was reported missing by her employer, a senior officer in the Cyprus police. And even that wasn't enough to push the case forward. And this was exactly the reason Nikos had been able to kill undetected for so long. He targeted domestic workers specifically, women who lived in their employers' homes, women whose social circles were narrow, whose ties to Cyprus were tethered to one person, and who, if they disappeared, would be quietly assumed to have moved on. But Nikos still hadn't provided the information that everyone wanted to know. Why had he done this? June 24th, 2019, Nicosia Criminal Court. Nikos arrived under heavy security and appeared without a lawyer. The charges were read: 7 counts of premeditated murder alongside charges of kidnapping. And he broke down in the dock. Given the chance to speak, he said he committed abhorrent crimes, that he couldn't fully explain why, that he had struggled to understand it himself. Regarding the children, he offered the justification that he suspected the mothers were planning to sexually exploit their daughters, and that in killing the girls, he was punishing the women and freeing the children. Prosecutors countered this directly. Both mothers were loving and devoted. There was no such plan. He had invented a reason where none existed. The three-judge panel found no mitigating circumstances for his actions. They described what he did as a campaign of murder. A man who chose defenseless women and did not hesitate to kill children. He was given 7 life sentences, 5 to run consecutively, 2 concurrently. The heaviest sentence ever handed down in the history of Cypriot criminal law. Nikos received the maximum a Cypriot court can give: 7 lives, 7 sentences. The system that made those killings possible received something else. As the case cracked open, so did a number that reframes everything about it. The Justice Ministry's own Committee on Family Violence disclosed that between 1990 and 2019, 39 women and girls had been reported missing in Cyprus and never found. The committee said, of its own country's record, that one wonders why these women are just a list from the government's own committee. Louis Koutrakidis, who headed the Housemaids Association and had personally tried to report Mary Rose Tiburcio's disappearance, put it plainly. When a Filipino maid went missing in Cyprus, police assumed she went north with a boyfriend. It was an assumption applied automatically for decades. These disappearances went unnoticed, not because of malice, but because of total and complete indifference. The activist Nicoleta Georgiou described the victims as doubly invisible, female and foreign. President Nikos Anastiadis publicly acknowledged that the police had acted negligently. He said he didn't believe it was driven by racism. The hundreds of people who filled the streets of Nicosia disagreed. Candlelit vigils turned into protests. Grief turned into demands for resignations and for an honest reckoning with the discrimination that had let these women disappear twice. Once when Nikos killed them, once when the police closed the file. At first, the demands got results. Justice Minister Ioannis Nicolaou resigned. Police Chief Zacharias Chrysostomou was fired by the president. 15 police officers were referred for prosecution on charges of dereliction of duty. And then in 2021, the investigation into those officers concluded there was insufficient evidence to proceed. They all walked their pensions intact. What the Cypriot system effectively decided is that years of ignoring the disappearances of foreign domestic workers did not amount to a crime. 5 women and 2 children were dead, but the officers kept their jobs. Livia Florentina Bunea was 36. Elena Natalia Bunea was 8 years old. For more than 2 years, the official explanation was that they probably went north. Maricar Valdez Arqueola was 30, reported missing. Asmita Kadkabista was around 30. She was invisible from day one. Mary Rose Tiburcio was 39. Her daughter Sierra was 6 years old. Mary Rose's flatmate filed a report the morning after the two vanished. Arian Palanas Lozano was 28, reported missing by a senior police officer. No one went looking for any of them. Cyprus is a place that records only a handful of killings in a normal year. There was no protocol for this, no institutional memory for it. Fire Chief Marcos Trangolas, who was involved in the recovery operations, put it simply. They had seen death, they had seen a lot of things, but they had never seen anything like this. And what this case finally revealed wasn't just one man killing for 2.5 years without being caught. It was a visa system that cut women off from protection. Those 39 women and girls on the Justice Ministry's list, we don't know how many of them met violence. We can't know because nobody looked. The rain found Mary Rose Tiburcio, not the missing persons report her flatmate filed that morning after she disappeared. The rain. And if the weather had not uncovered her body, who knows how the story would have ended. That is all for today. Thank you for watching.